How you guys doing? Thank you so much for being here. Can you guys hear me on the mic? Yeah. All right, perfect. Hello. So we're going to try to get started kind of on time. And there's going to be some people that are going to be trickling in. And so, yeah, see some familiar faces, so I'm excited. First of all, I want to start off by thanking the good people at the Office of Student Affairs who are in the back, who made this event happen. And also the good folks at the Voice program at Hugsy as well. They did a lot of support for us, so we really appreciate everyone. Yes. And most importantly, I really want to thank everyone who's taken time out of their busy lives to come here tonight to talk about a really important topic and to have a discussion that I believe is long overdue. And there's no better way than to do it than with comedy. What I love about this art is that we get to look at really serious topics and laugh at the absurdity of it all. My best friend's telling me to take my pen off. Thank you. This also gives us the freedom to look at really serious issues and walk through the dark, but knowing that the light is there at the end. That's what comedians do for us. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how tonight started, but to do that, I want to go back in time a little bit. When I was 8 years old and NEMR was 11, we were on the opposite sides of the world. My family was in Beirut, where the city was recovering from a 15-year civil war. And NEMR was in San Diego, where he could have been doing anything in the world, although he spent his time exclusively playing Nintendo. But like two ships that passed in the night, our lives intersected for a moment. My family decided to leave Lebanon and come to California, San Diego, to have more educational opportunities. On the other hand, NEMR's father mostly thought it was a great idea. The civil war is over, let's go back to Lebanon. And for that reason, we didn't know each other growing up. And that's important because we are cousins. We both struggled to adjust to a new life in the US because we spent our formative years in very different places. There might be some people in this room that can relate to that. Some people here have moved to new countries, new cities, or even when you came here to Harvard to start your master's program. When I was a kid, most of my time growing up, I wasn't aware that I was Lebanese or that I was an Arab, something that I didn't really consciously think about until the US invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. At that point, I couldn't escape being Arab. It was a reality for me everywhere that I went. And I wanted to do something about the conflicts. It was something that was really frustrating for me. So after I graduated college, I actually started an NGO in San Diego that's, in the past 8 years, have got some world recognition and sent hundreds of refugee kids to college. In the past 4 years, we've helped secure over $5 million of college scholarship to refugees. And thank you. With the applause, I get to check my notes. That's great. In the meantime, NEMR was on the other side of the world, bringing a region together through comedy under the message of no politics, no religion, one love. With several wars raging on, NEMR actually single-handedly started the stand-up comedy scene throughout the Middle East. But he did something much harder than that. He won over his critical Lebanese father, who was not excited about his son becoming a stand-up comedian. This happened when he was on the cover of the Rolling Stone magazine. I'm going to loop back around for the story. So 3 years ago, I went to Lebanon to visit family and friends, and I took a cab from the airport down to Beirut, and I saw NEMR's face on a huge billboard on the side of a skyscraper. And I said, yeah, that's my cousin who I've never met. A few days later, his sister insisted that we all got together for dinner, and we hit it off like we had grown up together. And when I went home that night, I was excited, like I met someone new, you know? So I went on his social media, and I noticed that he had already posted, my cousin Mark is coming on my radio show tomorrow, so excited. I love that he didn't even ask me if I was going to come on. Not to mention, it's one of the biggest radio shows in the Middle East. And I went back to California, and I get a WhatsApp message from NEMR saying, guess what? I'm moving to California. So I couldn't have been more excited about that. And when NEMR came to Southern California, that's really when I started to understand and believe in what NEMR was doing. He spent his years in Southern California helping my NGO raise thousands of dollars for refugee children. And during that same time, He was raising tens of thousands of dollars for NGOs in the Middle East that were looking out for the welfare of women, of orphans, and of animals. And now he is using comedy in the US to give Americans a perspective on Arabs that is relatable, familiar, and most importantly, laughable. This might be one of the best roads for peace because our conflicts are ones that begin and end in the mentalities and the perceptions of everyday people. I used to always tell NEMR that you might have gotten the height, the good looks, and the fame, but at least I got Harvard. But I'm so excited to welcome him tonight to this amazing community. And I want to encourage everyone here to engage with NEMR in conversations and questions in the Q&A after his talk, and to come speak to him afterwards, because everyone in this room is going to gain a friend for life in NEMR, whether you know it or not. And so I'm really excited to have him here. I want to give a shout out to Nadine, who's sitting here in the front, who's a huge organizer for this event. And she's going to give a great introduction for NEMR as well about his past, a little bit more relatable things to what's happening tonight. And so I would like to have Nadine come up here right now.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you again to OSA for helping us prepare this exciting event. NEMR, a Lebanese-American stand-up comedian, is accredited with establishing and pioneering stand-up comedy throughout the Middle East. And until this day, he continues to break barriers and build bridges to unite the people in such a divided region. He has numerous television credits from major networks in the Middle East. NEMR has been seen on CNN and recently appeared on The Nightly Show with Larry Wilmore. In May 2014, he was featured on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine, solidifying his legacy as the biggest name in stand-up comedy in the Middle East. But more importantly, how exceptionally photogenic he is. I think it's the beard or the very sharp jawline. NEMR's shows have sold out across the globe, from every major city from the US to London, across the Middle East, and his international tour has become the first global comedy event to successfully stretch from the US to the Middle East, with crowds of up to 5,000 people at every show. And lucky us, he is here today with us, with his hilariousness, brilliance, and through laughter and merriment, to leave us as a people closer to one another than when we were before walking into this forum. With a favorable spillover of his successful world tour in 2016, NEMR continues to run his game with a new show, bigger and better than ever. As Mark mentioned, No Politics, No Religion, One Love, which will make its mark on 2017 as not only a show the likes of which the world has never witnessed before, but will be one that the world really, really needs today. Ladies and gentlemen, his name is NEMR, which in Arabic means tiger. Coincidence? I think not. Tigers are on top of their food chain, and NEMR, you are definitely on top of your game. And we are fortunate to have a demonstration of this all today. NEMR, your efforts and unique contributions in dismantling negative stereotypes of the region and your undying persistence in extending horizons of knowledge through humor are some of the many reasons why I really have hope in the Middle East, with both its conflict and its beauty, that it will rise to its potential soon enough. NEMR, it gives us a great pleasure to have you here tonight, and we're excited to have the wonderful Huggsy community hear you speak to us and to move us. And a little PS, my mom is even more excited to have the Lebanese comedian here with me today. She's literally been sending me jokes to share with you, to show you, to show you how funny I am. But that's something that will take place offline. So, seriously, like when we were trying to plan this whole event for you guys, I would literally try to throw in jokes, like this is my chance to show them that I'm really, really, really funny. And so I think it worked. I hope it worked. Everyone sit back, relax, and enjoy this talk. And we do have a lot of time at the end for Q&A for all your hopefully burning questions. So without any further ado, NEMR.
Thank you. Nadine, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. No pressure. Thank you guys so much for what you said. That's very kind. Mark, I expected it because we're related. But Nadine, that was also very kind as well, since we're not related. Who cares about Mark anyways? Mark, very proud of you. Obviously, you're the first in our family to go to Harvard, I believe, which is incredible. And I made it too. I got a sweater. They gave me a sweater. So I'm just going to omit the fact that I didn't come here and just wear the sweater and act like it. All right, so first of all, thank you all for coming. This is incredible. When we first walked in here, they told me people were here early. I said, there's no way there are any Arabs, and I was right. So I'm glad that the Arabs that are here are still keeping in our culture. Oh, trust me, you came after we made that comment. Don't worry. So much confidence. No, we were here 5 minutes ago. Yes. Today we're going to be talking about a thing. First of all, before we do this, it's very important to me that anyone in the crowd today that has any questions, when I mean any, I'm a comedian, so political correctness is not in this room at all. And we have a whole anonymous thing set up for people to ask questions anonymously, so if you don't want to identify with that question, but if you have any question, and I mean anything, you should ask. This is the best time to ask, no matter what you think it is. If you want to ask what you think might be offensive questions, if you want to ask what you think might be prejudice or racist questions, they're not. If they're a question, it needs to be answered. I come from a unique viewpoint, and we're going to talk about that today, that we're not going to arrive anywhere if we wear gloves when we're talking to one another, if we're always afraid of the consequences. And I will never dismiss, and I'm going to get back to this in the talk, I will never dismiss anyone's feelings as racist or prejudice. I mean anyone. Even people who've called me very negative stereotypes, using the N-word with sand, I would rather not repeat it here, when I was in Oklahoma, or using other kind of words to describe me and my people, no problem. All of these people I ended up becoming friends with. So I really encourage you, because I think the biggest problem facing Arabs today is our fault, the Arabs' fault. So I want to say that off the bat. I don't believe that any American that has a negative perception of anyone from the Middle East is to be blamed. And I mean that. After I become super famous here and everybody's seen my shows, then we can hold you accountable. But at the moment, 100%, I do not believe any misconception you have about the Middle East is unwarranted. Today I was on a radio show in the morning, and they were asking me if we can see our women in Lebanon. Meaning, because, you know, are they fully veiled? Can you see them? The usual jokes. I ended up laughing. Pretty funny, good punchlines, everything was there. Inaccurate, but regardless, they came from a good place. We started the radio show, and in between the commercial breaks, I guess they, warmed up to me, they liked me. One of the people opened up his phone and Googled Lebanon and just exclaimed mid-interview, he was like, this place is gorgeous. It looks like Italy. Look at the beaches, my God, the women, the whole thing. Now, if I had sat down with that guy and he said, can you see your women? And I said, you know what, screw you, man, that prejudice kind of thing, you're totally, and I walked out. We would have never arrived to that point where he said, this place is gorgeous. The women are beautiful. And then I would have been able to tell him about the food and make up all these lies about my country and how beautiful it is. Because he's never going to go. So I can be liberal, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, what I'm trying to say is that had I blocked him out or dismissed him as immediately as somebody being prejudiced, it wouldn't have worked. I don't want people here, especially black people, African Americans, to think that I'm extending this unto them. In the case of black people, I understand if somebody's being racist against you, then that doesn't stand because you guys live together. But I'm talking about being an Arab. We have the worst PR machine in the history of mankind is the Arab PR machine. If there's any PR classes here, all you got to do is study the history of the Middle East, and it's a textbook of what not to do when it comes to PR. Our biggest export, and I'm going to throw political correctness right out the window, and anybody who disagrees with what I say, please, when we go for Q&A, tell me and be as real as you want. I'm a comic. I just want to remind that to all of you. Like, I make a career out of not being careful with what I say. The Middle East happens to be a crazy place, but it also happens to be my home. I grew up in San Diego, and when I was 11 years old, I went out to Lebanon in '93. My dad said we should go back to Beirut, and I quote, where it's safe. Now, the funny thing is, my dad kind of had an interesting viewpoint. When I was growing up in San Diego, they would send sketches back to our homes of these guys who were like, watch out, this dude kidnapped a kid, or there's a pedophile, or etc. And there was DARE. I don't know if you guys remember DARE, Say No to Drugs, which was the worst anti-drug campaign in history, because they made it like don't, say no to drug, don't have heroin, which you can get for like $25 from Big Tony. Like, they made it cool, and people started going for drugs more, and it had a totally opposite effect. My parents are Arab. Anybody who's here who's ethnic Whether you're black, Latino, Asian, or even some white people, I think old school, will understand how parents have a tendency, and Jewish, which is the exact same, by the way, as Arab, 100% have a tendency to blow things out of proportion like you've never. So if you tell my dad or my mom that a kid was kidnapped in Oklahoma and we're living in San Diego, then that means tomorrow my children will be raped and killed. That's the only logical conclusion that you can make. My parents wanted to go to Beirut because Beirut happens to be, and still is today, probably one of the safest places in the world. It's a place where a woman, and these aren't lies, by the way. It's a place where a woman could walk around on the street at 3 a.m. without any fear whatsoever. It's a place where we protect everybody around us. It's a place where there aren't any kidnaps or murders or rapes or anything like that, because it's a small country. Lebanon is smaller than San Diego County. It has a population of 4 million people. We've taken in about 3 million Syrian refugees since the conflict began there. And that's almost 100% absorption of our own population. And it is still one of the safest places in the world. Now, it translated perfectly. When we went to Lebanon, it was safe. The only problem, though, is something called war. That's the only risk that you have when you live in Lebanon. But as my dad explained it to me, he said, "Well, you can hear it coming." But the rapist, he's here. So it was for my dad, there was a very viable reason. Also, there's this, I don't know if it's a myth, I think it is, that Americans don't call their parents or don't visit them when they leave the house, which was unacceptable to my parents. Because if it goes a day without talking to them, it's like it's a complete disaster. We failed as parents. So this was another reason why we went to the Middle East. I came back 3 years ago because I spent the last 17 years, since the year 2000, actively creating the stand-up comedy industry in the Middle East, starting from Beirut, starting from the American University of Beirut, where I studied. Thank you. Which is our Harvard. That's the closest we got. And it's a very rich university in terms of culture. It's been since the late 1800s, and it's seen quite a bit of change. Now, today's talk, to get into it, is really, and by the way, I'm so sorry. We have veterans with us today, and I'd like to just, if we could give them a round of applause and thank them for their service. Thank you for coming. I'm so sorry. I wanted to say that at the top, but everything went to my head when they were talking nice things about me. I forgot. Now, first of all, today I want to do something that I don't think anything's ever been attempted before. I'm about to simplify the Middle East conflict. And I'm going to simplify it big time, because something that I've come to know is that it is one of the simplest conflicts in the world. It is not a conflict that has lasted for hundreds of years. Proof, in Lebanon right now, and in different places in the Middle East, in Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, you can find churches, mosques, and synagogues standing at sometimes even feet apart. Now, if there was conflict, you couldn't have one come up without bringing down the other. This is a recent conflict, and it's a conflict that a lot of people like myself, my generation, have nothing to do with. We were born into it. As my father told me, I was born into war, and I will die in war. Have I ever picked up a gun and fired it? Not once. But I've experienced about 9 different wars and lived through them. I've lost friends to wars. I've been in incredibly close encounters with death because of it, but I've never actually fought a war because these wars aren't mine. All I want to do is like play video games and have a good time and see my friends. And that's what a lot of people in the Middle East want to do. So today I'm going to start out by simplifying the Middle East, the conflict. Then I'm going to move on to tell you guys what the Middle East is in reality, or my reality. Afterwards, I'm going to move on and discuss what I believe the solution is to the Middle East. And hopefully that'll convince you that Arabs are truly America's imaginary enemy. That there is no enemy here. America and the Middle East happen to be on the literal same page and ironically fighting the identical enemy. But we have the biggest casualty of this war and this conflict has been the understanding between the people. Now, this wonderful picture here is where we're going to kick off the Middle East. Now, I could go on for hours talking about the Ottoman Empire and all. I'm not going to go back into Middle Eastern history. Because although that will define some of the conflict that there is today because it reaches out, what matters now is what we're dealing with, the biggest threat in the Middle East, which is ISIS, and how that came to be, and what we're dealing with today in the Middle East comes from the recent uprisings that happened in the Arab Spring. Now, I'm going to take you through a quick walk through Lebanon starting in 2005. This picture is a place that I literally walked right by a good minute, almost, before this happened. This is right next to the American University of Beirut. This is when, allegedly, the Syrian Bashar al-Assad and his regime killed the prime minister of Lebanon. C4 plastique underneath the ground and used it to destroy his armored, car, vehicle, convoy thing. There was no other way to get to him. And a lot of civilians died that day. And this is something that is, you need to remember, feeds into a lot of the anger that Arabs will feel. A lot of us die when we're going to university, when we're going to grab a sandwich, and we have nothing to do with this. What followed after this was the initial seed, I think, for what ended up becoming the Arab Spring. Up until that point, we were under Syrian rule in Lebanon. And by the way, this isn't the Syrian people. Another thing I want you to keep in mind is anytime I'm talking about a government, detach the people from it. One thing that you'll find out in the Middle East, the people have nothing to do with the ruling party. We're not asked what we want. We're usually subject to puppet governments most of the time. Up until this point, we were under Syrian rule. And here we are in a situation where our prime minister was trying to do things independent of the Syrian regime. That's why they point the finger at them the most. The result of this blast was outrage. The Lebanese people, for the first time, took to the streets because they couldn't take it anymore. And millions of Lebanese people took to the streets. Approximately 3 million Lebanese people took to the streets in what would become one of the biggest demonstrations in the history of the country. This is the only high-resolution picture I could find. There's other stuff. You can go and research this. It was called the Cedar Revolution, and because we have a cedar tree on our flag. And it was just millions of Lebanese people, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, all faiths together, and we were united. We wanted the Syrians out, because we knew that nothing could happen in Lebanon without the Syrians being involved. They were everywhere. They controlled everything. Something this big wasn't just going to happen. So we wanted our independence, and we couldn't take it anymore. So we took to the streets, and we achieved it. By the end of April, remember, February 14 this happened, just a few months later, by the end of April, the Syrians withdrew from Lebanon. Now, they withdrew. And despite having in Lebanon supporters, and a large number of supporters, especially in a certain sect of the Muslims who are affiliated with Hezbollah, they still withdrew, and no war happened in Lebanon. This is very important. Lebanon has had a civil war for over 30 years. Muslims killed Muslims, Jews killed Jews, Christians killed Christians, and everything in between. Christians against Muslims, and Muslims against Jews, and Jews against Christians, and Jews and Muslims. And the alliances shifted. And then Russia came in, America came in, Saudi Arabia, Iran, pick a country. China came in for the hummus. And then, basically, we learned from that civil war when it finished, and I went back in '93, we were all still there, all of us. Literally, all of us, just a lot less of us. We lost brain capital, we lost a lot of good people, and there we were, the same people, having a civil war building to building, neighbor to neighbor. It was insane. So we learned from it. So even though we had disagreements in our population, it did not lead to war. That's why Lebanon to this day is one of the most stable places in the Middle East. They beat that into us. We were beaten down by so much death and destruction that we learned. We've become very wise. Now, when the Syrians withdrew, we were promised by the Syrian ruling power that if we withdraw, we will bring your country down on top of you. What followed was a huge amount of political assassinations through car bombings, through just horrifying shootings, and anything you could imagine. Over the next years, the entire opposition in the government was eliminated. 14 people were assassinated. It was a very rough time. This also is the time when we started stand-up comedy officially, not an amateur thing in the Middle East. I'll get back to that. Now, this happened in Lebanon. The Syrians went out. Arabs took note. Holy shit, the Lebanese were able to make a change. In June 2009, in Iran, millions took to the streets to protest at the time the president there, Ahmadinejad, who wanted to get up for re-election. They created a human chain of about 150,000 people, and regardless, the results of the election came in Ahmadinejad's favor, and they weren't exactly maybe legit. What ended up happening is 4 days of protests happened, what was called the Green Revolution in support of the opposition to Ahmadinejad. They carried green kind of, this is the picture from there. They had a lot of green banners, and they were silent demonstrations. There were no slogans. There was nothing that was said. Regardless, the government at the time shut them down. 150 people approximately died in clashes with police in 4 days. Here you have another blow taken to, can the people really do something? Tunisia, December 17, 2010. I'd like to give a trigger warning to whoever's looking at the screen. I'll swipe over this picture, but because it's important. The next picture is going to be of a Tunisian man called Mohamed Bouazizi, who lit himself on fire to protest the enormous gap between the rich and the poor in Tunisia. This was what started the Arab Spring. In Tunisia, the outrage at this image was insane. All across the Middle East, it was felt. It was against the government of a ruler called Zain al-Abidin bin Ali. He'd been in power since 1987, and you will see this is a recurring theme with regimes in the Middle East. He was forced to flee because of demonstrations that erupted after Mohamed Bouazizi to Saudi Arabia on January 14, 2011. Victory for the people. At the time, that's what it was seen. In Lebanon, we were very scared because we knew that the power vacuum isn't safe. Egypt, January 25, 2011 in Cairo, the president there, Hosni Mubarak, had been in power for almost 30 years. These demonstrations happened, the uprising happened, there's extreme poverty in Egypt, and once again, the wealth differential between literally less than 1% of the population, the majority, is beyond your wildest imagination. You're talking extreme poverty or ridiculous wealth and unbelievable levels of corruption. No opportunities, no jobs. In many cases, these Arabs were rising because they wanted to have jobs. In many cases, these Arabs were rising because we just wanted equal opportunities at this point. Hosni Mubarak ended up resigning on February 27, 2011. Yemen. Well, this is actually Cairo right here as well. These were the protests in Cairo. This is Yemen. On February 27, the president who had been in power in Yemen for 12 years, and before that 22 years as the president of North Yemen, faced protests as well. Right now, we're in the full swing of the Arab Spring. Right now, people were like, this is working. All we got to do is hit the streets, go crazy, and we can change a regime that's been in power for decades. We can get our lives back. And the Middle East, all the Arabs just want control of their lives. We just want to be in control of our lives, literally. That's all we want. Now that it was in full swing, Syria followed. In March of 2011, the uprising began in Syria, which would eventually result in the civil war today, which once again in Lebanon, we were terrified of. We saw the uprising and we understood. We understood that the elements were not in place for there to be a power vacuum. We knew that Bashar al-Assad, who we did not like, and some people did, but we knew that he ruled with an iron fist, and we knew removing that iron fist, kind of like what happened in Iraq when Saddam Hussein fell, might not be the best idea if you don't have a solid backup plan. Lebanese became super cautious. We stopped demonstrating. We stopped everywhere. Like, guys, relax, because this isn't looking good. We could see where it was going. Then we have this dude. This guy's a character. This is Muammar al-Gaddafi. Gaddafi was the ruler of Libya for, geez, how long? Like, dude, I don't even know. Like, forever. Like, maybe 40, 50. Muammar al-Gaddafi was insane. Like, no, I do think that he was actually insane. He used to say the weirdest stuff. He once proposed a solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which I thought was the funniest thing I ever saw in my life. He had a whole press conference and he had a map. He had a whole thing. He goes, solution is simple. You have Israel. Then he flips a page, which we call Israel, right? And then he goes, you have Palestine, which we call Palestine. And he goes, the solution is, and he flips the page and it's a new map and he says, Isratin. And that was his, this is not even made up. I'm not even making this up. So this was his genius approach. One of the most corrupt evil people in the world, just as corrupt and evil as Saddam Hussein, just as corrupt and evil as every single ruler in the Middle East that I've mentioned so far. All right? When I say corrupt and evil, I don't mean like steals money, corrupt, I mean like will rape women, corrupt. I mean will destroy entire villages for speaking out against him, once corrupt, and stealing all the money and the wealth from the people. What happened now is you have Libya going crazy. This is the state of the Middle East right here. Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, which are all kingdoms, started to feel heat from their people as well. Now, they all had success, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain, in shutting down the people because of varying reasons. In Jordan, the king enjoys quite a bit of, he's liked by the people, so it helps. And some people don't like him, so it was easier for him to stay in power. Saudi Arabia and Bahrain had different methods. Bahrain was heavy-handed, shutting down the protesters. Saudi Arabia was they basically paid them off. It was they're like, what do you want? They're like, we want this. They're like, how about $350 million? Everybody's like, oh, we're cool. We're cool. Some of the protests in Saudi Arabia were kind of ridiculous. People wanted places to drive their cars so that they could do wheelies. I'm not even making this up. I swear, I'm being very real with you. Now, what happened is this. We had a power vacuum. In that power vacuum, an organization started to flourish called ISIS, which I'm sure you've heard of. ISIS was created by a guy called Zarqawi, who was the head of the Al-Qaeda branch in Iraq, which I'm sure some of the veterans here know very well about this conflict. He went on to form ISIS, and we're gonna circle back to ISIS in a second. But I want you to just note that this was originally happy, like kind of ish. You know, people were out. We were fighting. We were getting our freedom back. At the time, the naivety was doing this was going to end up resulting in a great Middle East. We're going to have the power back, democratic elections. One thing that a lot of people didn't realize is it's hard to go from a 30, 40-year-old dictatorship to suddenly giving the people choice. Not because the people aren't good enough. It's just, it takes time to slip into that system. Barack Obama said one of the biggest mistakes in Libya was that we toppled the government without a backup plan. Yes, you need at least a backup plan because you can't do something that monumental. We're not talking about switching your internet service provider. We're talking, unless you're with Comcast, but we're talking, which by the way is just, it's ridiculous at this point, but we're talking about taking away the entire way of life for multiple generations. Your father, the kids, you know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't an easy adjustment. ISIS took hold in the power vacuum and they began to rise. We're going to circle back to ISIS in a bit, but I want to show you these pictures. This is the Middle East that the world knows. I don't even know where I know where they are, but I'm not even going to tell you. It doesn't matter whether it's Syria, Beirut, Palestine, Israel, it doesn't matter. These are all the pictures that everybody knows about the Middle East. No matter what you go through, it's always just pictures of war and death and killing. They could be anywhere. This is the Middle East that everybody knows. This isn't the Middle East that I know. And it isn't the Middle East that exists today. It's just the one that our amazing PR has communicated to you. Now I'm going to show you the Middle East that I know. And by the way, I cut myself out of this video. This is a video of the Middle East watching comedy shows. I'm not in these videos because I don't want people to think I'm doing a placement for myself. But this is the Middle East I know. These shows that you're going to be seeing, I'm going to leave these playing for the next portion of my talk, is actual Arab people sitting side by side, Muslim, Christian, and Jew, with Americans in the crowd. When my special does get released, I actually ask if there are Americans in the crowd, and it's really funny what we do. And we filmed it in Los Angeles and Beirut, and it's the same jokes everybody's laughing at. The people here that you see are laughing. This show was happening when ISIS was trying to get into our country. Another show that's going to come up after this happened when ISIS was blowing themselves up in our hotels to affect our tourism industry. But a country like Lebanon fought back with humor. We sent a viral picture of an invoice from the hotels that was really exuberant, and we're like, no wonder they blew themselves up. There's no other solution. I mean, you can't pay that much money. We use humor to fight back. But this is the Middle East I know. From Beirut to Jordan to Oman to Qatar to Saudi Arabia. to Kuwait, to Dubai, to the Emirates. This is all I've seen from the Middle East. I've seen the war, but when I get on stage, this is what I see. People who want to live and people who are there to have a good time. This, my friends, if you didn't realize, is the power of American culture and change. You're taking a look at an American art form. This is stand-up comedy. When I started it, it didn't exist. This isn't an Arab art form. The closest thing we have to it is somebody called a hakawati, which in Muslim culture is somebody who used to, during the holy month of Ramadan, stand up and tell stories to entertain people. That's the closest thing we had to stand-up comedy, just because the dude stood up. I mean, that's as close as we can get. You know what I'm saying? These are all images of an American influence. Furthermore, I'm Christian. I'm not even Muslim. I'm an American Christian doing shows in English across the Middle East to crowds even in Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit, and everybody loved it. That sentence alone should not apply if you're going to be talking about the Middle East you guys know today. A Christian kid speaking in English, spreading an American culture all over the Middle East, selling out to tens of thousands of people, how could that be possible? Well, it is, and this is the proof. This show was in a Roman amphitheater. This is like an actual Roman Colosseum. We're in an area with that much history, and I'm doing a comedy show there, or as my dad calls it, I'm being a clown on stage. Now I'm going to talk about Saudi Arabia because that's an example of how, and this video is probably going to wrap up any minute now. This is an example of how American culture causes change. And I'm going to be looping back to this in a second because what shocks me the most today is how we've kind of given up. We've given up as if we don't realize how powerful America can really be. And when I say powerful, I don't mean like militarily, because that's undisputed. I mean even more than that. I went to Saudi Arabia and did the first comedy show ever there back in 2008 or 9 or something like that. When I went to do the first comedy show in Saudi Arabia, we couldn't do a comedy show in Saudi Arabia and mix the crowds between men and women. It's illegal there. In Saudi Arabia, women can't drive. In Saudi Arabia, women, obviously, there's no voting in the country anyways. There aren't cinemas in Saudi Arabia. The shopping malls are kind of repressive. Most of the restaurants in some areas of Saudi Arabia don't have windows because you can't see a man and a woman sitting next to each other. So families want to eat lunch. It's like this. There's nothing you can see coming in. It's a very repressive place. But the people, once again, nothing to do with the powers. So the first show I wanted to do in Saudi Arabia, we had to do it illegally. If we were going to get permission from the kingdom, it would have to be a show where they'd have my script. They'd have to look through it, see what I could say and not say. B, the crowd would have to be divided. You'd have women on one side and men on the other, and you'd have a wall in between. Not just that they're sitting apart, but they can't see each other. All right? So what we did is we did the shows illegally. Illegally meaning we didn't advertise them, we couldn't put it anywhere. We would go and select a foreign ground, an American consulate, Italian consulate, a golf course, some piece of venue that belonged to a foreign institution or a compound. First show we did there was at the American school, and they had a theater in there, huge theater. We get there, we can't do commercials, we can't post anything on Facebook, we can't do anything. We can only word of mouth. That's the only way we could do it. I'm coming and tell your friends, right? There's religious police in Saudi Arabia. Does anybody know what the religious police is? A few people know. Religious police are people who have the power of the king on the streets. If they see a woman showing a bit of ankle, or like I once I was at a mall and I accidentally bumped into a woman, barely, and it really was an accident. She made the biggest scene ever. Because if somebody from the religious police saw us bumping into each other and she didn't make the biggest scene ever, then she liked it, which could result in being whipped in the street, and if you end up dying because of it, it's no big deal. Lashing, all that kind of stuff. The religious police are terrifying. If you do something against the kingdom, you will disappear. So we also had them to deal with. First show there, we do it by word of mouth at the American school. Word of mouth. Over 3,000 people showed up, Saudi Arabians. No marketing. And I remember when we got to the place where we wanted to cross over to the venue, we had to park in Saudi Arabia, outside the school, and then walk into the school. And that's about 3 minutes to walk into the patch where the school actually is. And I was walking with about 1,000 Saudi Arabians. The other 2,000 were late. I'm serious. 1,000 Saudi Arabians and me were walking in silence. It was the weirdest thing I had ever experienced. We weren't talking to each other. Everyone was terrified. I wasn't. I don't know why I wasn't, but I always felt like this was how it was meant to be. I'm walking. The women are in groups with their male sponsors, the men who drove them there, usually their brother or their cousin, husbands. Fully covered, the women fully veiled. When we got to the American school, literally when our feet set foot on the American school, it became a celebration. The women, the veils went right off. They were dressed underneath. It's just, they have different clothes. And in Saudi Arabia, I found out a lot of the women who are some of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life they have the best fashion sense I've ever, but they have to hide it all the time. Right? Veils went right off. Everybody started hugging everyone. It was literally a celebration. The show lasted for over 4 hours. And it didn't really have anything to do with my comedic ability. It was just like, I finished an hour and a half, and they're like, no, stay. I'm like, really? Yeah. And then as soon as I'd start, they'd be like, so how's your father? How's the family? What ended up happening is that show was such a success that we had just developed a formula where the people had an escape, right? They could go watch a comedy show and be united all together in this place. But, it was illegal or whatever. But, we kind of had a hook. We're doing it on a foreign ground, so technically, but if the religious police ever catch it, we're screwed. But why would they? We're not advertising. Unfortunately, something the Arabs do a lot is when something is successful, a lot of people imitate. So if you have a local market in a place with a population of maybe 600 people, in 2 years there'll be 18 local markets because everybody's like, oh, he's making money, and then nobody makes money. What ended up happening is now they're like, oh, we can do comedy shows. Now everybody's a comedian now in Saudi Arabia. I had done about 4 or 5 shows. It had become huge. I went to every place in Saudi, Jeddah, Riyadh, Khobar, right? These are the 3 main territories. Thousands of people were showing up. It became like a cultural revolution. It was awesome. Other people started doing it, and then the BBC caught wind of it. And the BBC were like, let's do a story, an expose on the budding stand-up comedy industry in Saudi Arabia. And the guy who promotes my shows is British, okay? And he was dumb enough to say, yeah, come on down to a show that he was organizing with local comics. They came in, they filmed it. Even though they had permission, they filmed it like they were in there secretly, like all the angles were from the bottom or whatever. And then they released it a week before my show as an expose on how the Saudi Arabians are rising up against it. Now it became a political statement, which it was never meant to be. I arrive to do my show. I didn't know this. We get to do my show. I'm doing a show, I think it was in Jeddah or Riyadh. I get them confused. And it was a pretty big show. 2,000 people. It was going to be 3 nights. And 2,000 people a night. I was very excited. I had a suit. I was ready. I was excited. We get to do the show. We're about to start. My British promoter, Peter Howell-Please, runs in. He's terrified, pale. He says, there's a car outside. Get in the car. Get out now. And I said, why? He said, the religious police are at the door and they're coming in. They're coming into the venue. And I said, well, if we leave now, what happens to the people? And he said, he said literally, and I apologize, who gives a fuck about the people? We need to get out now or you will disappear, which is true. Now, I'm an American citizen, so I will eventually reappear. Trust me, I will eventually reappear. But there's people there that will literally have their lives ruined. There are Saudi Arabians in that crowd that will be used as an example. Anybody in that crowd who's related to a king or a queen or whatever, they will never show them. But all the civilians, they're going to get the brunt of it. It's going to destroy stand-up comedy. I couldn't have that. I told Peter that's not acceptable. We need to make sure they don't get in. He's like, you're on your own. I'm getting the hell out of here. I said, no, you're not. You're staying. This is all your fault and your stupid BBC thing. I took he had a pair of Bluetooth headphones. I put the Bluetooth headphone in my ear, wrapped it around my ear, slipped the cord down my jacket. One thing I know about the religious police is they're absolutely stupid. They're absolutely the dumbest people on earth. Wherever there's education, you will not find extremism. You will not find extremism in any shape, form, or manner. They're the dumbest people you'll ever meet. They don't speak languages, nothing. They're just like, they think the world is flat. And I'm not even making that up. I saw a guy give an argument which was amazing. He said, if the world is round, that makes no sense because then when you go into the air, China should come to you. Why do you go to China? And I was like, holy shit, I've got it all wrong. We run out and I run to the religious police. There's 3 men, like really not good thuggish type men. Religious police official trying to get into the venue and they're stalling them. I run up to them. I look like a security detail. I was in much better shape than now. I was pretty ripped. I had my suit on. I had it buttoned up, and I had my, nothing. But I had it in my mind. I was there, like I was Jason Bourne for real. It was dope. I ran up to the guy and I said, "What's going on?" I go, "Excuse me, is there a problem? Is there any danger? Are we in danger?" I just started speaking in English with a thick American accent. Obviously, they had no idea what I was saying. Very few words. Danger, danger. I said, "Ambassador Smith, is he in danger?" Ambassador Smith was the name of the American ambassador. I had never met Ambassador Smith. No Ambassador Smith, but I knew who he was, and I felt name dropping him would kind of terrify them. I said, "Is Ambassador Smith in danger?" And he said, "Danger?" And I said, "He is." And I poked the thing to my mouth. Nothing, just my sleeve. And I said, "Evacuate Ambassador Smith immediately from the premises." And I just started screaming. And the guy's like, "No, no, no." Because if there's an international incident involving the American ambassador, he disappears. Do you understand? His king will be like, "Okay, we had a good run, goodbye." He goes, no, don't get, and then this other guy who speaks some kind of English started translating for us. I understood what he was saying in Arabic. I'm not going to act like I knew. And he goes, "We want to know who's organized, what is this event?" I said, "It's Ambassador Smith's birthday." And he said, "Birthday?" I said, "Yeah, birthday." He goes, "Birthday." I go, "Happy birthday to you." So he could get it. I'm not making an iota of this story up, by the way. My promoter was standing to the side. I've never seen a British person sweat this much, and they drink like you've never seen anyone drink before. Like, he was going to have a heart attack. The guy goes to me, "Who organized the birthday?" And I said, "Let me introduce you." So I call Peter. I'm like, "Peter, come. They want to know who organized the event." Now, Peter, at this point in time, has lost all control of his bowel. Like, this guy is he's terrified. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "They want to know who organized the event." And he goes, "No, don't." I'm like, "I'm just going to give them the name." So I gave them the details of Peter's competition. Basically, that's what I did. I just wanted to mess with Peter for a bit. So we gave him Peter's competition, mainly because Peter's competition was backed up by a king. So it helped. Right? They're like, "Oh no, this company is owned by this king or whatever." So, by like a prince, sorry. So they went. And then we put on the show. And the people, when I went on stage, people knew that the religious police were outside. They were terrified. We actually put the show on, and it was incredible. That is what American culture can do. If you're going to be an American, just like the veterans we have today, bravery, everything, these are American traits, as much as they are Arab traits. That night, if I had bolted like a coward, we wouldn't have been able to continue with this. And I went back a few months ago, 2 months ago to be exact, for the first ever legal show in Saudi Arabia, because after the king died, his son took power, who's American educated, studied in America, and this is the influence of American culture. He abolished the religious police. They no longer exist. And he set up something called the Ministry of Entertainment. And they put on a show, a legal show where the crowd could mix. And that just happened because of all of these things we were doing. That's a huge evolution in the rhetoric in that country. Most importantly, the only restriction I have to sign a paper now before I go on that says, you can't speak politics or, religion, which I'm fine with, I don't do. No partial nudity. So full nudity was fine. I remember, I'm like, "So full nudity we get?" And the guy's like, no. And I'm like... That's one of the many stories about what I went through in the Middle East when we were bringing stand-up comedy to that region. Some of the stuff that were pivotal in creating this entire environment. Now, I mentioned America several times here. I want to make it important because something has happened that is very, very strange. Nobody seems to understand that Seinfeld, Friends, Frasier, the movies are the biggest things in the Middle East. Like, the biggest comedy shows are these American sitcoms. People love America. Now, when Donald Trump said the majority of Muslims hate America, that was false. But I don't blame him. And I don't blame anyone who voted for him who believed that, because in their perception, that's what they see. But it's not true. The majority of Muslims do not hate America. The majority of Muslims, and I'm talking about 99.9% of the Muslims in this world, and I'm saying this as a Christian, hate ISIS and they hate extremism. And you can take that from me. But you wouldn't know it because they're busy being refugees, they're busy running from their homes, they're busy being killed. So it's kind of hard to fight against that PR. I'm privileged enough to be able to do that, so I'm kind of talking on their behalf right now. Now, this power of change that American culture is not to be, it's not to be trifled. Something weird has happened. We've given up. America has given up on the Middle East. And in that way, it's given up on itself. I want to read a quote from a book that I read recently called The Rise of ISIS, Black Flags, The Rise of ISIS. It's by an author called Joby Warwick. And I highly recommend, if anybody's interested in the topic, to read it. It's a great book. He made a very powerful distinction between Osama bin Laden and the founder of ISIS, which is a guy called Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. Okay? There's a distinction. We in the Middle East know it. For us, Al-Qaeda, and in America knows this, Al-Qaeda is a walk in the park compared to ISIS. This is an organization, you've seen what they've been doing. Beheadings, killings, complete ethnic cleansings, ruining sites, libraries, religious sites, churches, mosques, and synagogues. Just ridiculous. The most ridiculous stuff you've ever seen. Extremism in its purest, most ultimate form. He says Osama bin Laden had sought to liberate Muslim nations gradually from corrupting Western influences so they could someday unify as a single Islamic theocracy or caliphate. Zarqawi, who made ISIS, in contrast, insisted he would create his caliphate immediately, right now. He would seek to usher in God's kingdom, as he puts it, on earth through acts of unthinkable savagery, believing correctly that theatrical displays of extreme violence, beheadings, killings, burnings, would attract the most hardened jihadists to his cause and frighten everyone else into submission. Frighten everyone else into submission. And he won. We're fighting a war that we've already lost. America is fighting a war that it's already lost. The Middle East is fighting a war that it's already lost. We've all been frightened into submission. ISIS has been effective for only one reason, because we've allowed it. ISIS is not a force. They started out, they're literally keyboard warriors that have been recruited mainly through Twitter. This is a terrorist organization that built itself through tweets and favorites and retweets. When we fought them in Lebanon, militarily, we decimated them at the border. The soldiers were like, this is ISIS? They were fighting. If you go and see videos of ISIS, dude, there's one of the leaders in ISIS. I saw a video when I was doing the research. By the way, I'm definitely on a list for the research I've been doing for this talk. One of the leaders in ISIS is destroying America. We will deal with the infidels. And he's wearing Ray-Bans. He's wearing freaking Ray-Bans. They're wearing caps. They go into war filming it with iPhones, using internet that America created, GPS location to tag it. That is an American luxury that's given to the world. It's absurd. They're fighting in slippers. Like literally, imagine DJ Khaled, right? DJ Khaled with a machine gun. This is what these guys look like. I'm not even making, go and check it out. They're wearing literal, what do you call, slides? They're going into war with slides like stop, It doesn't, there's no tactical, these are not a force worthy of the respect we're giving them as an enemy. But we've allowed them because our original tendency, and this is to blame on the Arabs, is that as soon as ISIS came to power, everybody was like, of course they did, because Muslims are all crazy. And the Middle East is full of Muslims, and there's nobody else there. And also because the Middle East will never be better. And look at them, they're all crazy, they're all insane. That was the biggest mistake, because what we ended up letting happen is we let ISIS take over. They're freaking running around with American weapons that they took from Iraqis, because they were able to infiltrate ideologically support amongst the people. What people? The poor people. People who don't know better. The masses, because they've been under dictatorial rule for generations. Their dictators made sure that they were stupid, so they could be easier to control. Do not be surprised if ISIS finds a foothold in some areas, and I mean some, of Iraq or Syria. Syria, there was a power vacuum, right? People were being killed and slaughtered by the President Bashar al-Assad, the opposition. Some people in Syria are very pro-Bashar al-Assad. And I'm not going to get into who's right or who's wrong. I'll never get into that. That's not my place. I'm just giving it as it is. They were being slaughtered. They turned around for support. They looked to America. They didn't get it. They didn't get it. Anybody knows that. They looked to the Middle East. They didn't get it. They fought with small arms and they were being slaughtered. Let's keep that going for a few weeks. Your kids are getting killed. Everybody's getting killed. You're going to turn to your next alternative. ISIS. They filled that power vacuum. They came in. They were so sweet. They took care of them. They gave them hospitals. They set up free education. That's how it started. They infiltrated the villages, and then they took control, and then you couldn't escape. And now you're in a situation in the Middle East where America needs to be very careful, and the world needs to be very careful, because letting ISIS stay one more day means all of the children in all of those villages are being indoctrinated and they're being brainwashed. Literally, a kid, dude, if you grow up knowing nothing but hatred, that's all you're going to know. If you take a look, and for all the black people that are here, if you know and look very recently into your history, you'll know that a lot of people who were born into the world of slavery saw it as a natural thing. They saw that enslaving people made sense. When you're born into something, you come to expect it. The only reason I see things differently is because I came here. When I lived in the US and then I went back, I'm like, whoa, it's not how it's supposed to be. Now, it's time that we define the conflict, because we've just allowed thousands of people to usurp millions. Millions. Is the conflict in the Middle East the Muslim world versus the Western world? No. It's a bunch of radical people who happen to be born into a Muslim faith, but trust me, they are not Muslim. Nobody in ISIS is a Muslim. Saying they're Muslim is basically me saying what's the girl's name from Beauty and the Beast? That's basically me. Do you get what I'm saying? It doesn't ring true. If you're a Muslim, you don't go and kill people. You don't kill women and children. This isn't what you do. It's not how it works. And if some of you think that's how it works, ask me, and I'll tell you why it's not how it works. We're in an ideological war. Is it extremists versus moderates? No, it's worse than that. This isn't extremism versus moderatism. This is an ideological war where you have people who believe that God is giving them a higher purpose. You have geeks from everywhere, from Belgium to England we don't know any of these people from ISIS. They aren't from our neighborhoods. We're not seeing them they don't speak our native tongue. You got Jihadi John and the Belgium butcher and I don't know, all these kind of people coming in. These are people being recruited from around the world because they're deranged. These are people that are coming in because they believe that God has a bigger plan for them and that they're going to be incredible, and now they get all these virgins, and sex is promised to them, money is promised to them, status is promised to them. That's what they're coming for. That's not the Middle East. That's like 30,000. Are we going to let 30,000 people define our lives like this? It's absurd. This brings me to what I believe the solution is. And that's why I wanted to make it very clear that I want to throw political correctness out the window. Love trumps hate. You remember that? During the election? I thought that was fascinating, because you had like a philosophical kind of discussion going on right there. Love does not trump hate. There is no situation in the world where love is the solution. Love does not trump hate in any shape. Nobody's ever died from a hug. Ever. Well, my grandmother, but I mean, nobody, she was great, but I mean, nobody's really hate. Right now, 30,000 people, that's ISIS, have defined one of the oldest civilizations in the world. Talk about having a base to build on, a legacy, right? Language was created by Arabs. The concept of the number 0, some of the most advanced doctor methods in the world, surgeries, light years advanced from the European. This is a civilization with a history. Religion was created there, for Christ's sake. Muslim, Christian, and Jew. Some of the most wise texts came out of there, right? But we've allowed 30,000 people to define that. That's what we've allowed. Because the solution so far has been, spread the love. It doesn't do anything. Syrian refugees, you saw what happened yesterday in Syria with the chemical attacks. We've allowed refugees to become defined as the thing that they're fleeing. We've allowed that to happen. And when I say we, I mean Arabs and Americans. Americans because this is a war that they're fighting. Arabs because it's a war we're not helping win. And we can't allow this to continue anymore. Refugees flee a situation, that means they aren't the situation. You can't flee a situation if you like it. You hang out if that's the case. Are there refugees who are going to take advantage and run and try to infiltrate and they're not really refugees, they're doing terrorist attacks? Of course. But let's be honest, we know when we take a look at children and piled up in bodies that that's not the case. Another thing you got to understand, in the Middle East there is no political correctness. I've seen public hangings. I saw piles of babies without heads. I've seen tons of stuff on TV that are shown to us that they use propaganda so that when they do want to do something extreme, they say, well, don't you see what they're doing to us? And they point to it. And it's very effective. Not in Lebanon, but in other places it works. Zarqawi, when he went to Iraq, he did something very smart before ISIS became. He saw a power vacuum there, and he ended up doing a lot of violent attacks on Shiite Muslims. ISIS is Sunni Muslim. And he used that to drive a wedge between the people. United people, like Lebanon, they can't get a foothold. And it was very easy. And that, my friends, is what the Middle Eastern conflict is and how simple it is. The Middle Eastern conflict is a few people in power that are oppressing the masses. And the masses want out, but they can't do it on their own. And it needs to be recognized that way. You have Sunni Muslims, which means Saudi Arabia, the Emirates. ISIS is Sunni. And you have Shiite Muslims, which is Iran. And then you got Hezbollah. They're backed by the Russians. And the Sunnis are backed by the Americans. I'm not saying ISIS. And then ISIS seems to be a confusing mistake that went way too far. It doesn't make sense. We have a power that came out of nowhere, armed themselves with American weapons, and now they're a threat to the world. And I don't mean America gave them the weapons. I mean they went into Iraq and took the weapons from the Iraqi army that were given to them by America. They took the money from the Iraqi banks. Today we're in a situation where love is not the answer. Hate needs to be recognized. I'll give you an example in America. Right now, you guys, we're in one of the biggest divides in this country ever. Republicans and Democrats at each other's throats. If somebody says something good about Trump, they're Hitler. If somebody says something bad about Trump, they're Muslim. That's how it is. That's how you're portrayed. I mean, if you're on the opposite side of the aisle, right? The situation is, when Trump comes out and says stuff like the majority of Muslims hate America, I don't get angry, because I know he's saying Arab, by the way. I don't get angry. When I see a lot more people being bullied in school, right? I don't judge Donald Trump. I acknowledge that what he's done and the way he won has infuriated that kind of emotion. But if we had done a better job of addressing those concerns early on, he wouldn't have been able to win using those emotions. I put the blame back on me as an Arab. And I say to myself, if you're being bullied in school, find strength in numbers. The geeks always outnumber the cool kids. Just get as many geeks as possible on your side. What I'm saying right here is I'm taking the hate and I'm accepting it. Hate is real. Hate exists. And for the people who have the hate in their hearts, it's legitimate for them. There are people today that believe that any Arab they have is going to impose Sharia law in America. That's the dumbest shit I've heard in my life. However, it exists. Somebody believes that. If my response to that person was just like my response earlier on when I told you I sat down with that person, if my response was, oh, you're a racist bigot, and I walk away, what have I achieved in this situation? I can't take a look at hate and say the answer is love and hold him and say, one day, I hope that you see things differently, and I walk away. It's not going to achieve anything. I'm going to sit down and say, you hate Arabs? This is something that happened to me in Oklahoma. I did a show in Oklahoma 2 weeks after a Lebanese guy was shot by a white racist guy, who had previously, a few months ago, ran over his mother with a car after having harassed them for 5 years as their next door neighbor. And he ran over the mother with a car, reversed, ran over her again. She's a Lebanese mom, very gangster. She lives. The guy goes to jail. The judge releases him on a $5,000 bond. He goes back to his house, gets a gun, goes over to the house of the mother, finds the son there. The son calls the police. The police come up to that house. They can't find the guy. So they say, sorry, we can't find him. So they leave. While the kid is on the phone with his mom telling her, don't come, because if you come, this guy is here. He gets shot in the head and killed with his mom on the phone. I was in Oklahoma 2 weeks after that happened, right? I took it as an opportunity to kind of reach out into the community. I went and visited a place which is famous for something called catfish noodling. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a thing where these rednecks will stick their hands in swampy marshes, and then a catfish will come and bite their arm, and then they lift it, and then you can't see when you put your hand in, and they compete over who gets the biggest catfish. And they say culture is dead. So I went there, and I'm trying to just see what this community is like, right? Because I know that this dude does not represent white people. I know that this is one insane, mental, crazy-ass person. Like, I know that. I get there, but I figured there's going to be a lot of tension, and there was, as you can imagine. Something like that creates tension in the community. I was sitting in a I think you could call it a restaurant, bar kind of thing. I don't know what it was. It was a hybrid of banjo, and it was weird. I get there. There was a piece about what had happened, followed by a piece about the Middle East and stuff going on. And this guy says, and I apologize for using the N-word. It was used towards me. He goes, "These damn sand niggers," meaning Arabs, "they're ruining the world. Fuck those Arabs," as he said. My friend turns to him and he says, "Hey man, like, just, tone it down, because he's an Arab." I had my beard shaved down. I don't really look Arab at all. He turns around to me and he says, "Arab? You don't look like an Arab." And I accepted his hate. So I looked at him and I said, "Very good. My plan is working perfectly." And the dude burst out laughing, right? And then I sat down with him. I'm like, "Bro, you're totally..." We ended up having like a 2-hour conversation. Like 60 people ended up coming to the show from that thing. We reached out. I'm like standing in situations of extreme hatred. Once again, I don't suggest this approach be used in situations where a black person is in, because the information is there. You shouldn't be racist in that situation. But in my case, I blame it on us. But I didn't use love. I didn't just sit there and kind of just like, "Oh, it's such a shame, and then hopefully one day." I don't like the fact that Americans feel that Muslims are not doing enough to speak up against terrorism. The reason is because Muslims are kind of dying. In the Middle East, and that's why they can't talk, because they're fleeing and they can't really organize themselves. But I don't like the fact that Americans think that. So I'm hoping that my shows and stuff like this will help people understand that there is a pushback in the Middle East, that ISIS couldn't infiltrate Lebanon, that the day before the first Paris attacks in Lebanon, we had 3 ISIS bombers blow themselves up, kill 56 people. Nobody talked about it anywhere. We didn't even get a profile pic on Facebook that we couldn't put. We didn't even get the thing to say that we're safe. You know what I'm saying? That's how disregarded we are. But we fought them. We fought them at the border, and they kidnapped 50 of our own soldiers from our military and then took them across the border and proceeded to behead one every single day for 50 days, causing enormous outcry in the country, hoping that by doing that, they would drive a wedge, because they had soldiers that were like majority Shiite and Christian, and they were beheading them. That would make the Sunnis become the enemy. The Shiites and the Christians would lash out at the Sunni Muslims, and then the Sunni Muslims would feel marginalized, and then ISIS could come in. It didn't work, because Lebanon was united, because we're not politically correct, because there is no love. We recognize the power of hate, because we died as a result. When ISIS was trying to get in, if you had a long beard in Lebanon, we racially profiled the shit out of you. And I mean Muslims racially profiled Muslims. I had a friend of mine who is a rapper. He calls himself MC Sheikh. I'm not even making this up. He goes to the American University, Beirut. He doesn't speak a word of Arabic. He's American, but he dresses up like an imam, like a sheikh, and he's a rapper. And he's so good. He spits fire, to put it in context. He's walking around in an area called Dahiya, which is controlled by Hezbollah. Hezbollah is Shiite Muslim, right? And he looks like a Sunni sheikh walking around with a huge, he looks like an extremist. He's walking in. The military detail there tells him to identify himself. He doesn't understand. Now you got a foreigner. Guess what? We know ISIS are mainly foreigners. They put the gun to his head. They're about to kill this kid. He starts crying. Like, he has no idea what's going on. He's like, "I'm MC Sheikh. I don't know what's going on." They're like, "Oh, he's American." They stopped. They're like, "Why the hell is an American like, it was all weird. He goes to prison. They interrogate the shit out of him. They hold him for 2 days, and then they release him. Like, legitimately, this guy's just like a dumb kid, like a kid. He goes on a TV station, a popular TV show, outraged. How could they racially profile me? Just because I look like this. The host goes, "Well, bro, couldn't you just tone it down for a couple of weeks? Don't you see what's going on?" My point is, there, in situations like this, you got to drop the political correctness, and you got to get very, very real. The Middle East is not complicated. You have the entire region is dying for freedom, and they're dying to be able to. In Lebanon, we just want good internet. We don't have electricity 24 hours a day. We didn't have a president for 3 years, which, by the way, you may want to try for a while. We didn't have a president for 3 years, which is when we absorbed 3 million Syrians without a president, and it stayed safe, right? We just want electricity 24 hours a day, which we don't have. We just want internet to be fast enough to watch Netflix, which opened in the Middle East, and now they're like, there's Netflix in Lebanon, but it took us like 20 minutes to download the announcement, so it doesn't even make sense at that point. We want jobs. We want wages to increase. We want to be able to love and be loved. We want our families to be happy. We want to provide. We don't give a shit anymore about any of the conflicts. We don't care anymore about anything around us. All we want is to be left alone. That's all we want. Just leave us alone. Just leave us alone. We got the most corrupt government. And they're all backed by people much bigger than us. When you're fighting Russia, you're in between Russia and America. Trust me, you just sit at home and you chill, right? Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Kuwait, Dubai, all of these places, to varying degrees, are quite unhappy. I wouldn't lump in Dubai because Dubai happens to have everything very stable. I don't want to seem like I'm making things up here. But it's a kind of a situation right now where people want to be left alone, and America's in a unique position. You got friends there, man. These are your friends. They like Seinfeld. Let them join in the fight. Whenever you guys come face to face with some kind of hate, don't dismiss it. Tell them about this talk. Because this is the only way things are going to start changing, is if we start to get this thing a bit out there. That's it. That is my summary of what the Middle East is today. I'm going to repeat this. I'm a Christian, American, Lebanese dude doing comedy all over the Middle East to crowds of tens of thousands, and I've never had a problem, ever. I hope that we can start moving towards overlooking stupid divides like Muslim, Christian, or Jew, and start looking towards stuff like actually making progress in terms of us being able to express ourselves artistically, to be able to express ourselves as one people. This racial thing, it doesn't exist. It's a figment of our imagination. That's my talk. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, NEMR. So we're going to take, NEMR's going to have a seat.
I am? Okay.
He's going to have a seat right here, and I'm going to join him. And right now we're going to give some time for some Q&A after the talk. I have up here, you guys, who here goes to school at Hugsy? Raise your hand. You probably used this poll thing before. So you can actually go to pollev.com / I'm sorry, I just opened this account, now it's my name, Markabon259, which looks like on the right you can actually submit an anonymous question if you don't want to, if you want to make it anonymous. On the left you can actually text it 37607 and you text Markabon259 if you want to ask a question. And then we have 2 people who are doing mic runs. Where are they? Andy right here and Sam are going to go get a mic. And you guys can actually ask questions right from where you're sitting. So formulate your questions right now that you want to ask NEMR. And in the meantime, this is Andy, one of the mic runners. Play professional soccer. Can run with the best of them. And I'm going to start off the discussion with NEMR asking a few questions, okay?
All right.
All right. Thank you, NEMR.
Thank you.
Appreciate the talk.
Thank you. And please ask whatever you guys really, go the distance, Muslim, Christian, whatever you want.
So I want to ask you, NEMR, what kinds of impacts on the Middle East think could happen if Jewish and Arab communities in the U.S. become closer and grow bonds together here in the U.S.? What do you think that could happen? What kind of impact do you think that could happen?
Well, first of all, Jewish and Arab, I don't know if we have any Jewish people here. I'm not asking you. We do? Okay, fantastic. It just seemed weird. Any Jews? No, but I mean,
safe space.
Anybody who is Jewish, if you ever sit down with an Arab family, you'll be shocked at how incredibly identical we are because we're pretty much the same people. So, our parents all want us to be doctors. They all want, nothing is good enough for them. We have the same stuff in common. And, if we come together, I think if Arab communities and Jewish communities come together, then we will help eliminate, if we do it in the US, it'll reverberate back in the Middle East. Don't forget, you guys are the leaders here. If Arab communities and Jewish communities can start up a dialogue, I think that'll help some of the communities that don't have a dialogue in the Middle East. There are in Iran Jews who live peacefully. There are in Lebanon Jews who live peacefully. But of course, there are other areas where they don't. I think that people working here will reverberate back in the Middle East, and it'll help a lot to bring stability to the region.
Awesome. I want to ask you again about comedy, too. Other than yourself, has there been any other American comedians that have gone to the Arab world, to the Muslim world?
Yeah.
And
Dave
what kind
Chappelle.
of receptions do they
Dave
get?
Chappelle was there a couple of months ago. Kevin Hart was there. Reggie Watts, if you guys know him, I actually brought Reggie myself. I took him to Saudi Arabia and they stopped us. Reggie Watts has a huge afro, and we had to make him tie it down because Saudi's like super conservative. And when we went there, the guy looked at him and he goes, how's he gonna eat salad? His hair is gonna fall in it. And then he thought it was the funniest joke he heard in his life, and he wouldn't stop laughing. And Reggie was like, ha ha, and he had no idea what it was. Look, you name it, they've been there. I mean, lots of great comics. Chris Rock is hopefully coming soon. Seinfeld, I know that there's, active trying to get him out there. We brought out so many comics. Musicians have been out there, from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Sia was just there. Snoop Dogg was there.
Snoop Dogg.
Which was awesome because there was like, in Lebanon there's the hash.
Yeah.
And he was like, and this police officer goes and gives him like a tree, which was the weirdest. And Snoop was like, am I being set up? Like he had no idea what was going on. I was like, no, it's from my garden. So it was like
He even put us in one of his songs.
And there's a video clip called I'm the Homie. If you see it, it's all filmed in Lebanon. There's like police officers with guns posing next to him like they thought he was cool.
So why do you think that they get such a great reception in the Middle East?
American artists?
These American artists.
Because dude, that's all we listen to. The #1 radio show in the Middle East, my show, is American top 40. Like that's the #1 show. Arabic music is atrocious. What shocks me is I come here and I'll listen to like Arab Americans who've lived here their whole lives. They listen to Arabic music, they do the traditional dances, they smoke hookah, and I'm like, we don't do any of, we're having raves and going clubbing out in the Middle East. We're like, what are you doing? So it's kind of difficult to relate with them here, which is funny, because they left and then they get clingy to the culture, which makes sense when you leave your home. I don't know if it's the same thing in Asian cultures, for instance. I have no idea, but they're huge there, man. I mean, Pitbull was in Lebanon. Yeah, for real. Like, it's great. Like, everybody was there. They sell out to crowds of like 20, 30,000. Justin Bieber is going to be in Dubai on May 6th. The Biebs.
So I want to ask you, obviously we saw the crowds.
Oh, and sorry, London Grammar came to Lebanon, and they're Jewish. I mean, they're Jewish, and they initially had fears of coming to the country, but they ended up coming, and they had a great show.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me, obviously we saw the crowds and the kind of reception that you get in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. How humbling and what has it been like for you to come here and be a nobody, essentially? Mm-hmm. What's been your strategy? What's been your hopes and your goals? My strategy has been to reach out to as many radio shows, talk shows, TV shows, all that kind of stuff as possible, and put all my stuff online for people to easily access. Then we filmed this special, which you saw shots from. Mm-hmm. We filmed it in Beirut and Los Angeles. And the strategy is to get it onto like Netflix or HBO so that it can be easily accessible by Americans. Because I figure that if American people watch a comedy special filmed in Beirut and Los Angeles, and they don't realize until it's done that they just laughed at a show that was in Beirut, meaning they just laughed with a bunch of Arabs and a bunch of Americans at the same thing, I think that'll do more progress to change perception of the Middle East than any talk you can give. Just somebody going, wait, that was in Beirut? That looked like it was here. That's what that's what the strategy is, to kind of reach out in that way. Perfect. So you guys can see the questions are kind of coming in. So people that want to be anonymous. So NEMR can take a look at the questions. But obviously, we wanted to include this in here because if you wanted to ask a question. Are you single? You can see NEMR after the show for that one, after the talk. So NEMR, maybe you can start taking a few of these questions as they come in. But aren't they going down though? What happens when? I'll scroll them back up. So what we'll do right now is I'm going to get off the stage. Yeah. You can come up and do your thing. If someone wants to ask a question live, Andy right here and Sam have microphones. So just raise your hand. NEMR will point to the person, and then Sam and Andy, you can do the runs. Yeah, we'll do that as we'll start right there. Okay, so we'll do 2 questions, poll, 2 questions. Sounds good. Are you single, NEMR? Non-poll. Am I single? No, I'm not. His girlfriend is looking at him. My girlfriend's here, actually. She's armed and dangerous, so be very careful. She's with ISIS. No, okay. Okay, so let's start. You want to call on people? Thank you so much for an amazing show, and thank you for what you. Okay, that moving on. Sorry. What you do? Do you think you could have the same impact if you weren't American? No, I don't. I don't think I could have the same impact if I wasn't American. I don't think I could have the same impact if I wasn't Christian.
I think it brings legitimacy if you're a Christian defending Muslims, because it's like he's not just saying it because he's Muslim, and he's been treated well by Muslims. That helps. And if I wasn't American, I wouldn't have fallen in love with stand-up comedy. Dana Carvey was the first comedian that made me say I want to be a stand-up comic. The Ninja Turtles were a huge influence on my life in terms of like, yeah, this is cool. Like, I wouldn't have been exposed to that, right? If it wasn't for me being an American. If it wasn't for me being an American, my parents not coming here, I wouldn't have fallen in love with reading the way I love to read. It wouldn't have expanded my horizons. That's why I'm equally proud to be Lebanese as I am to be American. I don't have American blood in me, per se. I don't think any of us do, unless we're Native American Indian. But I mean, I don't even have generations here to go behind. But I feel as American as any of you. And I think that's what's amazing about America, is that it's not a place where you have to be born to be a part of it. It's a place where you kind of commit to the ideal. And that's what I think inspired me to believe that I can make a difference. Because if you can make it, if you can make a country out of people who think they can make a difference, then you can change a region like that. So definitely no, America is a big part of me. How does enjoyment of American media translate into acceptance of more Western ideas like homosexuality? Recently in Lebanon, about a month ago, the LGBT community celebrated a great victory. It's the first country now in the Middle East, I don't know about Israel, but I mean Israel's side, because I don't know their laws, that has made it, it's not illegal anymore to be gay. They actually ratified, yeah, it's true. They removed the law. There was a law that if you were gay, that you could go to jail. It was never enforced. Where? In Lebanon, my country. It was never enforced. We have a lot of famous gay people in Lebanon. It was just like one of those ancient archaic laws, and it kind of stayed. And the LGBTQ community, rallied for it. They have an account, LGBTQ Lebanon. You can go check it out online if you guys want to see. And they post some of this stuff. They're treated, and when I say they're, I'm sorry, it sounds kind of condescending, but I mean, the LGBTQ community is treated very, very well in Lebanon. And there isn't that persecution that you see in some other places where there's extremism right now. When you see a character who's gay in the series Modern Family, Raising a Family, which is a huge hit in the Middle East, do I need to tell you how much of a difference that can make when you like somebody and you see it? It's how you expose people to culture, right? If you expose them to two dads raising a kid and you adore them, it's not going to be that hard a pill for you to swallow if that ever happens to your kids. So that's my answer for that.
Remember, you want to take a live question?
Yes. Let's start with you, sir. Sorry, I'm just picking randomly. I should have picked the woman. Ladies first. How Arab, Jesus Christ.
Hey, thank you for your talk. I'm originally from Kazakhstan, from Central Asia, and I moved to the US when I was 11, so exactly same age. I want to ask you, how did you go about transitioning into Lebanese culture, and how did you come to do stand-up comedy, transition to that later on?
Sure thing. When I went to Lebanon in '93, the Civil War had ended, everybody was coming back. Everybody wanted to be back in Beirut where it was safe. So all of my friends didn't speak Arabic. I had friends that were Canadian. My best friend's from Toronto. Another one's from Cyprus. A third is from the Emirates. And a fourth is from Australia. So we didn't speak Arabic. It wasn't a difficult transition in terms of finding friends. You found a lot of people who were in your same situation. That really helped. You had a lot of people who were coming from the US or Australia or whatever and didn't know anything. There's no electricity. You put up your Nintendo and it's like NTSC and PAL, it's black and white. You don't know what's going on. We had these things in common. The biggest adjustment happened to like, what the hell is this country? Like, we have to do all this crazy ass stuff. There's no electricity all the time. And it actually pushed me to go out more, like play basketball and stuff. So it actually had a good impact on me in a way, and read more because there was nothing else to do. So in that case, it was an easy transition. About stand-up comedy, something I wanted to do since I was a kid. My mom had these cassette tapes because she grew up in London of Woody Allen doing stand-up. And yes, he does stand-up. You should check it out. Steve Martin, Lenny Bruce. And I grew up listening to those before the internet came along and I could get inspired by seeing clips there. In the year 2000, when I went to the American University of Beirut, I'd host the AUB Outdoors, which was an outdoor concert. And I'd host by doing stand-up in between the bands. And I developed a following there at my university. That's really where stand-up in the Middle East started, was on that campus. And then year after year, my following grew. And when I graduated, a big war happened in Lebanon. And I wanted to bring the country together. So when I announced that I was doing a legitimate show, I had a base that would come. And we built it show by show. Thank you for your question. Shall we take another? Yeah, let's take another. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I'll check you.
Thank you for your show. As a skeptical TV skeptical Iranian, I think you're funny, and you know how Iranians are with Arabs in general. So your grade is A+.
Thank you, thank you.
So my question is about keeping hope up.
Yeah.
As an American and Arab in an era where Middle East is, you know how it is, and the U.S. So how is your everyday life? How do you keep your hope up?
You keep your hope up by remembering who you are. And this applies to everybody. If you're American, there is no shortage of examples of great people you can look up to who've done great things before you. So that doesn't give you an excuse not to do great things yourself. As an Arab, it's the same thing. As a Persian, it's the same thing. I mean, the contribution of Persians to culture and society is beyond immense. Some of the greatest scientists and writers, and right now you have Oscar-winning directors coming out from Iran, and you have the Persian community here, which has been such a great influence in America and has done some great, great things. So for me to keep hope up, I ignore the negative and I focus on the positive. And for me, at least I have something to fight for. I don't know, there's a comedian called Aaron Cater, he has a hilarious bit about Palestinians where he says even if Palestinians were given peace, they wouldn't know what to do with it. Because he's like, I told the guy, imagine you just got peace. What would you do? And the Palestinian guy was like, we will fight for the, like they don't know anything else. They have nothing else to go on. So at least we have something to strive for, a legacy that you can set, and something you can tell your children one day that because of me, your life is easier. And then you can remind them every time you want to take out the trash, you want to do their homework. That's how I keep it.
One more. Yeah.
We'll go here? Or one more real question?
No, let's go back to the polls.
What's your advice for Trump? Because if he was listening. I think Trump could do so much better if he just learned how to talk a bit better. I really do. And this isn't an endorsement of his policies. I disagree with pretty much a lot of them. But from a public speaking standpoint, I'd love to sit down with him and be like, dude, you could have worded this just a bit differently and it would have worked so, it would have been so much. My advice to Trump is hire an Arab, preferably an Egyptian. Those guys can talk themselves out of anything. I'm serious. Hire an Egyptian dude to write your speeches and America will unite like never before behind some of the worst policies in the world. Like it's just learn how to just do a better job talking and be a bit nicer. I mean, it's not that hard. I'm Lebanese and proud too, but why aren't... Sorry. It's like, I'm Lebanese and proud, no. Why aren't we talking about the accomplishments and contributions of other Arab countries as well, especially the ones in the media and most right now like Yemen? Well, mainly because I'm Lebanese myself, so I'm talking about my personal accomplishments and stand-up comedy, which I can talk about. But I did mention Saudi Arabia and the new king and what he did. So I don't want to talk about too many accomplishments about other Arabs too. I'm hoping this talk will inspire you to go research more about the Middle East. Plus, because I talk for like an hour and 15 minutes. So if I'm going to get into the accomplishment, I'm sure this was written by an Arab mom, by the way. But I'm sure, if I'm going to talk about the accomplishment, tell them about when we... Our accomplishments in the media right now, like Yemen, personally, I don't see those accomplishments in the media right now. I don't see that we've accomplished anything in the media. And by my media, I mean American media. I don't think we've accomplished jack in the media. I set the bar very high. Until America becomes pro-Arab, we haven't accomplished anything. And since you're Arab, for the Arabs out here, just adopt the Arab mentality that nothing's good enough and you'll understand where I'm coming from. Hi, Mark and NEMR. NEMR, why do you sound like Bill Burr in your show? I do? Okay. I don't know. I guess I'm a big fan of Bill Burr. Maybe because of his influence on me. I guess so. When I was a comic in the Middle East, I didn't have any comics to work with, so I digest it. That's the biggest compliment ever. Thank you. What city are you from in Lebanon? This is somebody who wants to know what kind of Christian I am. Can we marry him to our daughter? I'm from a place called Ras Beirut, which is Beirut, which doesn't really mean anything because there's a lot of Muslims from there, so it confuses everybody. Are you from Ras Beirut?
What?
No worries. And I thought you had a moment. So but I live in a place called Adma, which is just a place called, not that it means anything. We'll take a real question.
Yeah.
Anybody have questions? I'll get right back to you. We'll jump to this side of the room. You're the Jewish girl,
Yeah,
right?
I'm the Jewish girl.
All right,
One
hello.
of the Jewish girls.
One
I'm
of the
not
Jewish
the only
girls.
one in the room.
You're the only Jew.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. It's
Thank you.
awesome. And yeah, totally as a Jew, I feel like I can relate to everything that you're saying about not setting the expectations of your parents. Even being here at Harvard, it's not good enough.
No, it isn't.
Because I didn't go here undergrad.
Oh.
Thank you. I also do stand up.
Okay.
So I watch a lot of Bill Maher. I'm curious if you do. Yes or no? Yes. So what do you feel about his stance on Islamophobia in the States and about this ideological war abroad?
Well, Bill Maher, as I'm sure you know, he had that famous exchange with Ben Affleck when he said, like, all Muslims are, you know, they're just crazy. Obviously, I disagree from my talk with Bill Maher. Don't blame him. But I am a bit disappointed in him because I look towards comics to be the people who have a higher understanding. And since that's all we do, I kind of expect comics to research a bit more for their thing. But I don't know what experiences he's been through. It would still be a situation where I'd sit down and try to understand why he has this position on Muslims. Honestly, in my personal experience, be it Muslim, Christian, or Jew in the Middle East, the bad experiences I've had haven't been exclusive to any one religion. It's been with just bad people. I've had some Muslim people who have treated me like family. You know what I'm saying? I've had some Christian people, and I've had some Muslim people treat me like complete horrible, and Christian people the same thing. So that's a great question. I mean, if hopefully soon I get to the level where I can actually sit down with Bill Maher.
I tweeted at him for you, and I tagged you in it. And
Well,
I was like,
thank you.
please have him on your show.
Now that I have a Jew on my side, we can actually make it happen. So thank you. And that's the cooperation between the Arab American
Making it happen.
thing. Thank you for your question.
Just because of time, we're gonna have 2 more questions. And
Okay.
We'll leave all your questions for offline for whoever wants to ask one.
All right. Should we take another question in person over here? Oh, we got.
You had a burning question.
Let's get him and then the lady right here. Best, thank you.
NEMR, thank you for the talk. It was
Thank you.
amazing. And I'm really amazed by the cultural diversity that's in the room today.
That's
And
thanks to these two and the Hugsy, which I just realized meant HGSE the whole time. Like, who the hell is Hugsy? And I was like, oh, and the voice. So thank you guys also, and thank you.
We're in the Harvard School of Education, and I think one of the biggest reasons is for us to get to this conflict at the first place is because of education, not just in the Arab world, but also here in the United States and in any other country. The way we do not focus on sharing cultural diversity in schools, whether it's in the United States or in Lebanon, is a problem, because had we been educated that Lebanon and the Middle East is what NEMR has been showing in his presentation today, ever since we were young, we wouldn't get into this problem. So I really urge you all to think about ways how to integrate such education later on in your careers and into public schools here, into private schools here, or even if you're going back to your home countries, because if education is improved and the younger generation perceives the Middle East in a different way, the problem can be fixed.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
NEMR, so my question to you is, where is it more important to start? Is it more important for us to improve the education system in the Arab world and try to change their perception of the U.S., or vice versa?
Definitely the Arab world. There's no way on earth, if you're going to marry a woman and you want to go meet her parents for the first time and you want them to accept you, you don't go in there expecting them to do their research and you to act the way you act with your friends. You go into that house on your best behavior, showing them the finest version of you so they can accept you before you start to get familiar and show them that you and all that crazy stuff. The best thing the Arabs have done is food so far. Lebanese food is our biggest hit. Especially if you're in Los Angeles. People are like, oh, I love Lebanese food. So that's a great, no matter where it comes from. But I do think that the onus 100% is on the Middle East. We haven't exported anything from the Middle East, even though we didn't export this in any shape, form, or manner. But to the Americans, all they've received is 9/11 in the recent history. That's a problem. We don't have movies coming out here for the Persians. We don't have movies coming out here. We don't have TV shows. We don't have a Seinfeld. You get what I'm saying? We haven't done our contribution yet. After we do our contribution, I will hold people accountable. Before then, the onus is on us. Yes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Layla Hariri. I'm actually from Saudi Arabia, so
There you
that's
go.
wonderful to hear about all the work you're doing there. I know like Hisham Fagih and
Yes, of course.
other people who are doing similar work. But I had a question to ask you about
Yes.
your name. Is it your given name name because it's
Yeah.
my cat's name, and he goes by Nim Nim because Sim Sim just seemed too cliche for a cat name. So I was wondering if that's your real name. Or...
It is. Nimitz is my grandfather's name,
Okay,
and that's how it goes. He had 2 brothers before him who died at birth, so they told my grandmother that if you want to have the next one live, give him a strong name, and they called him Nimr, which means tiger. My full name is Nimr Abu Nassar, means tiger, father of the victorious.
Oh, wow.
Which is why there's conflict in the Middle East, because you can't, these names, you can't like play the flute or like just listen to like smooth jazz. So there you go.
Okay, well, wonderful hearing from you, and it's wonderful to meet you.
Thank you, Layla. Good to meet you as well. Anybody else? We're kind of rushing through them at this point. If there's nobody else, we'll jump here.
There's one right there.
One right there?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you, Layla.
Thanks. So awkward because I was going to ask you the question in case you weren't going back to there.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's
No
what you
worries.
were about to answer. But I'm curious about like why you say sort of put the onus on the Arab community when, especially in the United States, like there's sort of 2 sides. You're saying there's not a lot of opportunity within the Arab community to produce right now, but then you're saying the onus is also on them, and also a lot of the people producing the news about sort of like. When you talk about like the 9/11 being the big thing, I think of that as being an American-driven initiative. So why are you placing the?
Are you
onus
talking about
there?
the attack or the fallout?
No, the fall. The
Okay,
fallout.
just
like
making sure.
Like,
I was like, okay.
we're just
Yeah.
gonna go right into conspiracy.
Yeah, right
theories
into
now.
conspiracy
Right
theories. It's an
there.
inside job, I'm telling you now.
Yeah, no, but sort of the narrative about Arabs' involvement is a very sort of, I think, American created, not Arab
True.
created. So
100%, yes.
So then why do you put the onus on the Arab community versus the American community to not like spread propaganda?
That's an excellent question. Because the American community believes that it's under siege right now. The Arab community cannot, it's hard for it to fight. I mean, there's people like me now, and there's more people who have the privilege and the ability to do what I'm doing. When I put the onus on them, they have a duty to turn this thing around. That's what I'm saying by that. The US is full of people who wake up super early in the morning, go to a job, and hustle. In Lebanon, we don't really work. I'm being very honest. There's no political correctness here. We have something called summer hours. So in the summer, we close the banks at like 1 in the afternoon to enjoy the beach. I'm just putting it like we have some time. Do you get what I'm saying? Now, we have a lot against us, and I'm 100% with you on that. But Americans wake up super early. They work really, really hard. They come back, and they send their kids to school first thing in the morning. They work hard. They got issues at work. There isn't really job security. There's a lot of problems that you have to deal with in stress. In Lebanon, if I miss my debt payments, it's no big deal. I know the dude who runs the bank. We make a call. It's chill. Over here, you miss a debt payment, foreclosure. Things are going. Your house is taken away. Now you're homeless. You can't provide for your family. The stress level is different. 1. 2, you come back home after a very long day of work. Try to spend a minimal amount of time with your kids before you put them to sleep. Then you got, if you're lucky, 30 minutes to yourself, maybe an hour. I don't expect the American person to be like, okay, Israel and Palestine, let's sit down. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to find a way to make it attractive to people like you would make it attractive to a kid to read. I want people to fall in love with this part of the world, and then maybe they'll start understanding more about it. But going and doing it right now and expecting Americans out of nowhere to understand a conflict after something like 9/11 happened, and the propaganda machine, which we need to fight as Arabs, is pushing it as an Arab thing, where there's no way it was an Arab thing. Dude, when 9/11 happened, I was in Lebanon, the streets were empty. People were horrified. We were sitting at home. People were crying across the country. This was horrific. So that's the reality of the situation. But you guys don't know that because nobody's told you. How the hell are you gonna know that? There's no way. So that's why I put the burden on the Arabs. But thank you for your question. That was really great.
Okay.
We're out of time?
Just because of the sake of time, but this has been incredible, and thank you so much for coming. And even as a Lebanese Christian and myself, I've learned so much from you, and I hope you guys did too. So thank you so much for coming. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please ask. You could ask offline if you have the time.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, and I have a show this Saturday at the Wilbur. If you guys want to come on down, that's a comedy show. It's called No Politics, No Religion, One Love. You can go and check me out there. So the Wilbur Theater, if you're here this Saturday.
And the tickets are on NEMRcomedy.com.
Yes, and videos you can watch and laugh. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.